I was born in London and there were bombs dropping all around. I came to Australia when I was 2. I feel Australian, I am Australian. And the Russian part was always very large in my childhood because my mother told us again and again about Russia through fairy stories, through family stories, in every way. And Russia was the magic thing, always. When I was about 8, I was taking a little honeyeater around. The honeyeater had been kicked by a horse by accident, and I had her on my finger, and I used to take her around to drink from the flowers while I was nursing her for maybe about 5 days, and I fell in love with her, of course. Someone said to me, Yellow Pinch Wildlife Park is for sale. All the animals are dying. We have to do something. Well, that was like a red rag to a bull because I couldn't turn away.
What were your priorities when you first established Pottery Palace?
Well, the most important thing for me that comes first, always, is animal welfare. And after that comes education. So again and again and again, if you think like that, everything falls into place. Like you're getting heavy bureaucracy coming down on you, but you know that the animals have to come first. You can't just obey a rule if it's going to harm an animal. And we do need to show the native animals to people, because when I was at school we learnt nothing about native animals. We learnt about giraffes and elephants and lions and tigers. Nothing about a wombat. A lot of people don't even know what a wombat is. And as for a phascogale, which we've got in this area, most people don't even know the name. So when we began at Pottery Palace in 2006, I chose the name because I thought at least it might stretch people's knowledge a little bit, and the animal that they don't normally come across, a potteroo, could be interesting for people to learn about it. And the name Palace was a bit of a joke, but it was the conditions we wanted to create. And the name stuck, and I thought, oh, maybe someone will think of another name. But in fact, the first zookeeper we had said, you cannot call a zoo Pottery Palace. No one will take you seriously. But the children love it, and it's stuck, and people do remember it, and people do take it seriously, because it was an extremely run-down zoo when we took over in 2006. And as my friend said to me, all the animals are dying, and I knew that we had to do something. So now the animals are happy, the staff are happy, the volunteers are happy, the visitors are happy, and it's a bit, some people come and they expect it to be like a circus, and they said, oh, we didn't see any animals. But it's because the animals have nice pens and they can hide if they feel like hiding. And most people think that's a good thing, and they love the fact that we're doing that. And in fact, if they go to the talks, the keepers will say immediately, well, you just have to look behind that clump of grass. So it's a real sanctuary. It's as close as possible to what these animals would experience in the wild. And of course, when you cage an animal, anyone who's been working with wildlife doesn't want to have to cage any animal that can be free. So straight away we thought we should only be caging the animals who can't be released but who can have a beautiful life. And I was very lucky because national parks at that stage, the head of national parks said, look, just keep doing what you know is right, and if you have any trouble just send the people to me. But of course he's been made redundant, and all the people who were so good and so in favour of wildlife are now redundant at head office as well as down here. Now all of us have this heavy bureaucracy on us in every field. It doesn't matter if it's teaching or nursing or wildlife, and even the wildlife groups themselves have become totally bureaucratic. But there is a way out of that with community. It's the only way, as far as I'm concerned, community, and we exchange things and we help each other and we support each other, and we know that there are all these people that we can trust with our lives, and we can trust them with any animal. Otherwise, we're just going to follow rules, and it's not going to be good for anyone. I loved working with wildlife always, and I was in Wires for many, many years. In fact, I was chairperson of Wires, but then a greater glider came into care, and I thought I can just nurse her for a week and then release her. And after a week she said to me, I'm old, I have no intention of climbing another tree, and I would like breakfast in bed, thank you. So her language was as clear as could be, and I had her for a whole year and a half, and the head of national parks came and visited her and said to me, my goodness, that is a happy animal. My goodness, that is a good educational animal. But he said, there's nothing I can do to make it all right for you to do that. But he always said, if you have any trouble with anyone, just send them to me. But of course, being in something that was open to the public, we were always getting into trouble. But she didn't turn her hair, the little greater glider. She had the sweetest nature, and she lived another year and a half of her old age in comfort. But then, later on, a year or two later, a wildlife carer from Kiama rang me and said, I've got a koala sitting on my sofa. He's got a broken collarbone and a broken wrist, and the vet says she can fix him, but she doesn't feel he would survive in the wild. So she said, will you take him? And I said, well, there is no way we're going to euthanize him. So Blinky came. I went through 6 months of bureaucracy, but he came. And after that we ended up so that the keepers were saying, just recently I've heard keepers saying to visitors, we only have rescued animals here, animals that can't be released but can have a good life. But now the bureaucracy is coming down heavy and saying we're not allowed to do that anymore, we can only take animals from other zoos. But in fact, there's no way we're going to stop. One way or another, we are not going to kill an animal that can have a happy life and be an educational animal. So it's welfare of the animal first, every time, and then education after that. And working with community, you get so much support, and one way or another, you just work around what is needed for that animal. And if there are difficult people, you somehow work away from them. I suppose we could take people to court, and I know the Gippsland people do, the wonderful, wonderful wildlife workers, Jill Redwood in the Gecko group, the Gippsland Environment group, they take Victoria Forest to court and they win. But the only trouble is that Victoria Forest sometimes just ignore what they've been told in court, and they go and log a precious place. And truly, I don't see any reason why we should be looking at things on such a large scale all the time, like climate change and so on, if we just protect our forests and grow more trees, more native trees, like the native forests. They've got all their ecology, they've got all that wonderful family of so many different animals. How can you cut down a tree that's 500 years old? But they're doing it. My brother was called out by the we've been fighting to save the forests now for 40 years, and he was called out by the group who were protecting some of the forest around here with his chainsaw to take a slice from a tree to show here's a tree with a diameter like this that was hundreds of years old and should never have been touched because it's a home. It's got little microbats under the bark and every imaginable little creature living in the bark. Then it's got hollows for possums and gliders and cockatoos, and everything under the sun is living there. Flying foxes are visiting to have the blossom, to have the nectar and pollen. How can you have the gall to cut down something that's lived 5 times longer than you have? There was a great drama about lyssavirus. Lyssavirus was supposedly carried by flying foxes and so dangerous to humans. But when it comes down to it, in all the years that whites have been in Australia, 3 people have died of lyssavirus. One was from a yellow sheath-tail microbat, not even a flying fox. One was from a little boy who found a flying fox who was on the ground injured and played around with it, and when he got scratched he didn't tell his parents what had scratched him. If he had told them, he could have gone immediately for an injection and he would have been fine, but he didn't, and so he did get the lyssavirus. And the other one was a carer who had just decided she didn't want to be vaccinated. So that's lyssavirus. Then you come to hendrovirus, more recently the drama over that. Okay, there is still absolutely no evidence of a flying fox transmitting it to a horse or a human, hendrovirus, nothing. We know that cats carry it, but no one wants to know that because a lot of people have cats. We know that dogs can carry it. We know a lot of other animals like guinea pigs and ferrets and things can carry it. What do you have in stables? Cats to keep the rats down. So the cats are passing it to the horses, and the vets come and treat the horses, and the vets get it and die. But there's still no evidence of it coming. And always, even with lyssavirus, you have to have a scratch. I have told all our keepers there is no problem if you get scratched by a flying fox and it bleeds. All you have to do is go and get an injection at the hospital for rabies and you're fine. What does happen though is that the flying fox will get killed because they will want to test its brain. So the flying foxes who are in permanent care don't scratch or bite at all. You can have your finger in their mouth by mistake with a piece of banana on it. There's no way they would bite you or scratch you. But occasionally if you rescue an animal and it's on barbed wire, it might be difficult not to be scratched or bitten. So the flying fox is the only one in danger. You're not in danger. You have the injection. Flying fox gets killed. So if I ever have twice maybe got scratched, I say, oh, the flying fox flew away. It's the best way, I think, and then they get away. When we came to the land at Candelo and started the community farm, 1975, my brother and my husband chose the land, and to me it just looked beautiful. So I said yes, and I thought immediately, we better give it back to the First Nations people. And then I thought, no, I think that would be irresponsible. It's a clapped out dairy farm, beef farm, so maybe we'll make it more natural. So my first thought was 820 acres, it needs to be shared. So that's why we became a community farm. But the amazing thing is that we've had a Koori bloke, an Indigenous bloke called Marcus Mundy, who has a group of young, mostly boys, who he was bringing out to the community farm to get them used to native animals again and relearn their culture. I said to him, so awful that they're also cut off from their culture. He said, it's still there. And he would come out and he said, let's go one animal at a time. They'll learn everything about wallabies and kangaroos, and then the next week it might be wombats. The next week it might be cockatoos. And so they were coming out and doing that. And then, more recently, he came out with his entire family. Little boys, his nephews, his sons and relations and cousins. And he was taking them around Cow's Nest. He was saying, this is your land. So it's happened anyway. They knew it was their land. They knew it was country. They knew it belonged to them. They don't talk about belonging. They talk about the land owning them, if anything, but not the other way around. Because I don't understand how anyone ever thinks you can own a piece of soil, a piece of air, a piece of water. What? Kidding themselves. I mean, the First Nations people know that we're just taking care of it till we die. And then we're compost. I hope. As a community, but also even as individuals, we can do the most amazing things. I can remember when I was still a child, well, not really a child, I was probably about 18, my father told me about the Nature Conservancy in America. And it was a group of people, mostly I think people who had made money as real estate agents, or in some way they had made money. And they were saying, no, we're not going to rely on any governments anymore. We'll just buy the land. So it didn't matter if it was a square metre for a microscopic little insect that was very rare, or whether it was thousands of acres for a wedge-tailed eagle, or in their case, bald eagle. They would somehow manage to buy the land. And that was called the Nature Conservancy. And then what started here by Martin Copley was Australian Wildlife Conservancy. And he started it in Western Australia. We went to his first sanctuary, and it was just a question of keeping that environment and making sure all the ferals weren't there anymore. And then the wildlife can flourish. And that's what has been done all over, especially the top part of Australia. I think they've got about maybe getting on for 30 sanctuaries now, and some of them are vast in the north of Australia especially, but even Scotia in New South Wales, and some, I don't think there are any in Tasmania, but in other states there definitely are. And somehow or other, other people have come to the party and they can go on getting contributions. And it's such a quiet thing that goes on with them. You don't see it getting much publicity at all. They've managed to make friends with governments, universities, and Kooris, of course, the Indigenous carers for the land. They've paired up with them all the time in some of these northern ones. And what they've achieved is absolutely vast. And I just think that needs to go on. And they have said, we're now reintroducing dingo to many of our sanctuaries, because as soon as you reintroduce the dingo, you've got no cat or fox problem at all. Not only do the cats and foxes stay away, but the dingoes might kill them if they did come onto the land. A dingo only kills what it wants to eat. So all the little ankle to knee animals are flourishing. If they want to eat a potoroo, they kill one potoroo and eat it. Not like a fox or a cat which might kill just 20 just in one night, just like that, and eat 2 of them perhaps. So this has worked incredibly well, and more people are waking up and realizing that we need the dingo. I thought once that American thing, Yellowstone Park in America, that showed how reintroducing the wolves made not only the animals flourish, but the plants as well. I would have thought everyone knew that example, but anyway, AWC, Australian Wildlife Conservancy, have done it here, and it's absolutely brilliant. Sometimes they do feral animal fencing around huge areas, but even if all they do is make sure the feral animals are gone, whether they're donkeys and camels, and actually camels are soft-footed, they don't do too much damage. It's the sheep and the cattle and, yeah, those hard-hoofed ones. The horses that do the damage, like the Brumbies in Kosciuszko, that are doing the damage. Camels have bred really well in Australia, and I understand that they don't really do much damage at all because of their soft feet. There are farmers for conservation now. There are even farmers for dingoes. There's a group of farmers for dingoes now because they see that their sheep don't get killed as much because the dingoes only really want the carcasses. And whereas wild dogs, you know, like dogs that have been just dumped, would want to kill a sheep. They love chasing sheep. Dingoes don't just chase animals. They don't waste their energy. They chase if they want to eat. And that's all. And that's the kind of top predator we need in Australia, and it can bring back all the little ones. AWC, some of them, where they've fenced out feral animals, they just make sure that there are no feral animals still there. And then they start introducing bilbies or quolls and eastern quolls or anything that's becoming rare. Long-footed potoroos, long-nosed potoroos, bettongs. And the wonderful thing is that they've done it with the marla. And the marla was really, really special to the indigenous people around Uluru. So that when there weren't any more wild marla there, they were really, really distressed, and the women actually got together and made a protected area, organised a protected area for the marla there. But then a forest in Western Australia, I think it's called Dryandra, it's spelt Dryandra forest, became a sanctuary, and they asked whether the marla could come there. And the Kuri women gave permission, and the marla went to that sanctuary and they flourished. And then the people who were running the sanctuary invited the Kuri women to come back, the elders to come back and see for themselves. They sat in the daytime and the marla just came because they were playing, I don't know what they were playing, didgeridoo or something like that. And the marla came out in the daytime to the elders. They went back to Uluru really happy. And there are some amazing things happening, and all we have to do is just learn from. That's the way you do it. If you've got some money, you put it to good use. You keep the forest instead of getting it logged constantly so that the animals are all driven out or killed. I remember when there were just a few koalas left in the forest around here, and I know, because people have told me, loggers have told me, who said, I'm really sorry, I'm afraid when we bring down a tree and there's a koala or a possum, we kill the young because we know they won't survive because the mother's been killed. And I said to that particular man who said that to me, well, that is kinder not just to leave them there to starve once you've killed the mother. It's kinder than just abandoning them. But he was telling me all this. His daughter was standing up we organised music nights a lot, and she was standing with me listening to the music, and the people singing were singing, now the whales are gone, but the slaughter goes on. They're going to the Eden chip mill. And she was in tears. Like her father was a logger, but she was in tears. She knew. And I think more and more people are waking up.
How difficult is it to work with government for change, for the benefit of our wildlife?
Well, quite honestly, even local government can be really oppressive. Like our local council is mostly developers.
Yes.
And they are not sympathetic. I mean, they're very nice, but they're not particularly sympathetic at all. We've had several wonderful people who've been elected to council but have been howled down and pushed down for so long they haven't lasted. I think community is absolutely the only way. We've got an amazing state member at the moment called Michael Holland, who's a gynecologist, and he gave up his whole medical practice in order to stand for Parliament because he thought he could change things, especially in hospitals and in amongst nurses, the nursing system. And we rang him the other day because we needed help because the bureaucracy was squashing us at the sanctuary at Pottery Palace, and he came out immediately the next day and he said the politicians even are helpless. Yes. It's the bureaucrats who've got the power and the big business. Big business. So to me that shouts out loudly again, community. We just do it ourselves, community, and we keep doing it. I think it already exists in the Bega Valley. I truly do. I've seen it so many times in the Bega Valley. People waking up, people realising we're here to support each other. We're not here to fight anyone or think that person's dirty or that animal's dirty. We're here to support all life. So many people have got it. Yeah. And okay, you need something. Someone says, oh yeah, I've got one, you can have. You know, it's so easy as that. Our freezer broke down when we were just about to do a beast. And somebody who's a volunteer at Pottery Palace said, I can get you one with a huge amount knocked off the price. And it was just as simple as that. That's right. And there are even people at the library now who will fix broken machines. There's one day a week when you can go and have machines and tools fixed. All these people who are doing it for nothing. And we did it right at the beginning because we were at Cow's Nest, we were breeding quiet Jersey house cows for people who just wanted one cow for their family. Mm. And there was an electronics engineer up the hill, and he gave us a colour TV in exchange for a cow. But I mean, you do it on that level easily amongst people. And we are so pampered in Australia. Like, there is no such thing as real poverty in Australia. No, right. I mean, even someone lying in the street has access to food and has a bit of a shop that he might sleep under, and people will help. But, you know, you go to some countries like Africa and someone has nothing, but they're still happy and they're still, like I've only been twice to Africa, but I noticed the difference even in that time. And my husband, who's been for years, could see since apartheid stopped the difference, and from looking like this to looking you straight in the eye. And we went down to a place called the Potholes, down. And after we came up, a group called the Grandmothers of Christ were walking up in single file, all singing. And I mean, and then another time we broke down outside a village, and little boys came running to help and brought their father to help break down. I mean, people in Africa seem to be happy. I didn't see anyone who was begging in Africa. I think I might have seen one on the borderline of begging in Cape Town, possibly in the city. But people are happy. You come back to Australia and, oh, I'm so worried, I need a new fridge. And I don't know how I'm going to get a new fridge or a new car or something. when you've got nothing, you're grateful for whatever comes. I mean, because I've lived with no electricity, no water, I realise how lucky I am to be here. But most Australians, most of us are so pampered. We're used to having everything that we need all the time, non-stop and more.
If you were thinking about a sequel to Being Change, a film Being Change, what would the content look like?
Oh my goodness. That's a hard one. I think I would focus on community. Community is going to be our way out of this deadening bureaucracy which seems to be all over the world now, that's just closing down things, stopping us doing things, making us more limited in our ideas and making people fearful everywhere. So community, you know, I was at Cow's Nest yesterday. Community is so, so strong. We have what we call safe conflict, because in a democracy, you've got a real democracy, you've got everybody being taken notice of. And there are some real democracies. There is one in a beautiful, enormous city in Brazil, and it's called Alegre. And they've had real democracy now for, I think it must be 5 or 6 years. And something like the World Health Organization is watching because they're so sure they're going to fail. Everybody has a voice. Nobody is hungry. Nobody is without education or shelter. And they have committees so that everybody has a voice. And all the chair people are women. You will always have conflict where you've got everybody having a voice. You've got conflict. But if it's safe conflict, yes, you know you're all right. And it was happening yesterday. There were 3 wonderful women arguing over how they did the washing up. And I said to them in the end, what you're talking about is irrelevant, but the way you're talking is just brilliant, because they were each respecting the other one and listening. Real conflict. No one was trying to dominate someone else. And that's how it is with real democracy, which is more like anarchy, because everyone has got a voice. It's never static. It's changing all the time. Any community is changing all the time because everybody's got a voice. There's something really, really sad with the wildlife groups, that they're saying you must not show the animals that you're fostering in public. And that is the saddest thing. It's as if the government wants to wipe out all native animals, so then they won't have any problems with EPAs or whatever they're called. But with the wildlife groups, when you've got a little pouch animal, you become the mum. That little animal is absolutely perfect as an educational animal until it's introduced back into the wild and to its own kind and so on. That is a perfect animal. I used to have to go and do talks to primary schools, and I knew perfectly well if I didn't come with an animal, the children probably wouldn't be listening as well to the talk. So an animal brings a talk to life, whether it's to Rotary or whatever group, adults or children, it doesn't matter. An animal brings the talk to life. So I went to national parks and I said, I need an exhibitor's license. And wonderful Steve Dovey, head of national parks, said, I can't do it. But again, anytime you have trouble with a person, just send them to me. And he allowed me for years and years and years to keep in particular flying foxes who could have a good life, but who couldn't fly. And so we could open the release door when the camp was in residence, and the ones who could fly could rejoin the group. And we could do the same with the little orphans after creche. We could introduce them to the bigger flying foxes and they could fly out. And the ones in captivity went on having pups, flying fox pups. And we went on letting those pups at 13 weeks be taken away from the mums, and at that point the mums would say, "Thank you, that baby was so heavy and I can't fly to another tree to get away from it." So those pups were taken away and were taken to creche with all the little orphan flying foxes and could join them for a soft release, coming and going as they pleased and being fed if they wanted to, going off with the camp of thousands of flying foxes if they wanted to. And we would like to continue that. We're being told we're not allowed to do it. Once an animal's born in captivity, you've got to keep it in captivity, like that. I don't agree, because the only way we can possibly replenish, well, even just the flying fox population, leaving out other animals who are so threatened, is to keep doing the very most we can and introducing these little fostered orphans to the public so they see this is a magical little animal. I remember some people from America came and I introduced them to a wombat and they said that is the most wonderful thing that's happened to us in our whole life. Our whole life. You know, and people in Australia, I mean, again and again and again, people come to Pottery Palace and they meet the blind wombat that we have, who was full grown when she was hit by a car and made blind. They meet her and they just say, "I had no idea." These wonderful animals. You know, people need to meet these animals up close, and especially when we are being the mum, we know if that animal's going to be stressed. We know if a sugar glider is feeling stressed, and okay, it can stay totally enclosed and just the tail's hanging out, so a little kid from kindergarten can stroke the tail. And they know that was real, that was a native animal. And snakes, my goodness, a woman in Bega was having a group of preschool kids and she said, "Do you do snake familiarization?" And I said, "Well, we don't, but we should." And she brought her group of kids and all I had to do was say to the kids, slow motion. And this python, I put her in a bush, and those little kids, wow, you could have seen the magic in their eyes. They made not a sound and they didn't do any fast movements at all. Never. And while we're on that, my goodness, I would like to talk about Olivia, who was an amazing olive python. National Parks confiscated her from a man in Wollongong. And I have no idea what he did wrong, but I know there was a court case. So Olivia came, and because of the horrible disease that pet snakes in America have transmitted to our pet snakes, it's called IBD, inclusion body disorder, we quarantine all our snakes for a whole year. So I was the only one handling Olivia for a year. Somehow or other she would always know when I was coming to take her out, and she would be waiting at the door of the cage, just like we expect our dogs to know when they're going to be taken out, even when we're half an hour down the road. She was like that. And after her time of quarantine, I took her out for talks. And she would only ever go around people's feet. She would always stay on the ground. But then one time, she started climbing up a young man. He was paralyzed all down one side. And she was climbing, and I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "Yes, I've never met a snake before. This is amazing." And she kept coming up and she hung over his arm. By that time he was in tears. And the second time it happened, I had said to the people who had come for the talk, I had said, "Please don't make any sudden movement, because sudden movements always frighten snakes, and they have to look up like this and you think, oh, that snake's going to attack me." But all they're doing is just sensing whatever's around them and getting one molecule on the end of each of the forks of their tongue, taking it back to the Jacobson's organ, which is on the roof of their mouth, and then they know everything about what's going on and whether this is a friendly person or not, and whether I can just go down and keep going on my way, or whether I have to be wary because they might want to kill me. Anyway, here there were these wonderful group being quite quiet, and this poor woman with Parkinson's disease shaking all over. And she said, I'm going to frighten the snake because I can't stop this. Olivia came up to her, came up across her lap and just stayed there. And the third time it happened, I thought, this time I have really made a mistake. This couple is so healthy. We'd finished the talk and Olivia was just having a little explore and I was walking beside her and the couple were walking away. And suddenly she turned a right angle and went straight to them. And I said, I'm sorry, I can see you're perfectly healthy. And I'd been talking about how she spots when there's something wrong. And the man said, no, I've just come out of hospital yesterday from having an organ removed, a kidney, I think, removed. So she was just a magical snake. And this is what all snakes are like, so sensitive. Even though it might not have been the first one, I think falling in love with wombats was the most memorable part. And I do know that I have expected other people to fall in love in the same way. And I was sitting next to a butcher from Eden, and he was saying, oh, I go out and shoot wombats every weekend. And I just took the little wombat that I was nursing and put it on his knee, and he was in tears. And he said, I'll never shoot another wombat. And I think he fell in love in that moment, and wombats definitely are good little ambassadors in that way.